Good morning. Good morning. Um, Today's topic is personal protective equipment, better known as PPE, and it's one of the ways that we help protect our employees from injury. So it's very important stuff. What's going on here? Right, there we go. All right, so we're going to talk about the purpose of PPE, some alternatives to PPE. We're going to talk about a job hazard analysis. You'll find out that's an important part of the process, how to select PPE, training, types of PPE, and then inspecting and maintaining your PPE. So here's some of the things we're going to talk about: noise exposure, general requirements, eye and face protection, head protection, foot protection, and hand protection. Two items of PPE, respiratory protection and fall protection, we're not going to talk about in today's seminar. They'll be covered in future trainings. But the respiratory protection alone, that's each one of those would fill up lengthy seminars. So what is the purpose of PPE? Personal protective equipment is designed to protect employees from workplace hazards. It helps create a protective barrier that separates the employee from the hazard, and it reduces exposure to the hazard, but it does not eliminate it. At the end of the day, the hazard is still there. So if a guy's wearing goggles but he takes them off, he's still exposed to the hazard. And PPE is not the best solution to preventing hazards. OSHA would rather see you engineer those hazards out of the process. So controlling them before you get to PPE. PPE is kind of like the last resort when you can't figure out how to engineer a safe solution or something, then you use PPE. So it's preferable to engineer the hazard. If we're talking about, say, dust control, okay, they would rather see a ventilation exhaust system to control the dust than have a guy wear a respirator. So administrative and engineering controls are eliminating the hazard before the employee is exposed to them. For example, putting up these guardrails and handrails is eliminating the need for fall protection. And in OSHA's view, that's a better solution. So first, try and eliminate the hazard before you assign PPE to the employees. The job hazard analysis is a big part of your PPE program. And basically what you do is you go through your business and you look at all of the work processes and you identify the hazards that may be present in any one of those hazards. Okay, so you look at things like, sweeping the fireplace from the bottom. That's a work process. And how do we protect the employee? What are the hazards? Well, something could get in his eye. Clearly, we have respiratory issues. We have noise issues from the vacuum. So you look at each process and identify the specific hazards. And then you figure out what controls are necessary to abate those hazards. And then you look at another thing, okay, spraying spraying any type of chemical, water sealant, things like that. Those are work tasks, and you need to look at what hazards are present and then what you need to do to abate the hazard. So it's a very comprehensive look at your business and how you're going to protect your employees. It's not just about PPE; it's about all phases of your business. So the job hazard analysis is important. There's tons of information out there available about conducting job hazard analysis. But if you're just getting started with safety, it's a great thing to do in your business. Get your employees involved in the job hazard analysis because they know the jobs better than, oftentimes better than the managers do. So involve them in that. And it helps them take ownership when it's time to say, okay, guys, if we're doing this job, you need to wear hearing protection, goggles, and a respirator. Okay. So it's again, it's an in-depth look at your business, and it's an important part of your safety program. So once the job hazard analysis is done, needs to be reviewed and approved by management. And again, each work task needs to be considered during the job hazard analysis. And then, once you get the analysis done, then start with developing solutions in a priority fashion. What's the most hazardous thing? Well, let's tackle that first and solve that one, and then move on to the next. So equipment selection will be based on the results of the job hazard analysis. So we define the hazards, and then we select PPE to protect against those hazards if we can't otherwise engineer the hazard out of the process. Okay, so first, after you identify hazards, look at ways we could remove the hazard from the work process. And if we can't do that, then we need to select PPE that will protect the employee, and then make sure that the PPE properly fits each employee. Warning signs, maybe not real appropriate for us because often those hazards are in the customer's environment at their residence. So, we're not going to go nailing up hazard signs at their house. But if you have some, things in the shop, like if you have a saw or something like that set up in your shop, put up appropriate marking about any type of PPE that might be needed. So when is PPE required? Well, whenever there's a hazard present as part of the work environment or work process that has not been removed, during any time where employees may come in contact with hazardous chemicals, irritants, radiation, light, and again, when the employer is not able to prevent exposure through work practice changes or engineering controls. Only then would you assign PPE. So, what areas or parts of your job require PPE? Employers need to take a look at their work processes, but employees can also be a big part of that. If there's something in your job you think is hazardous, talk to your managers or supervisors about it and help provide a solution to that problem, because at the end of the day, it's the employee who stands to get hurt. None of us want to get hurt. Well, it's the employer's responsibility to recommend and provide PPE. At the end of the day, it's up to the employee to actually use it. Training requirements. Once PPE is selected, the employees need to be trained about when it's required, what type of PPE is required, how to properly put it on, take it off. That's known as donning to put it on, doffing to take it off, how to adjust it, how to wear it properly, what the limitations of that PPE is, and how to properly maintain, clean, care for your PPE, and also when to dispose or retire the PPE. That's all part of the training that needs to go into it. And, a great source of that information is the product instructions that come with each piece of the PPE. Most of the manufacturers of PPE realize that training is necessary, and they provide that information in their packaging. That's that 50-page little booklet that comes with your respirator that nobody ever reads, but it's a great source of training information. So be sure to document your training with written and signed records. In OSHA's view, if it isn't documented, it probably didn't happen. So it's important to document any type of safety training and have your employees sign it. Who provides PPE? Well, the employer is required to provide PPE at no cost to the employee, and they must provide replacements when that stuff wears out. You don't have to replace PPE if it's lost or intentionally damaged. So, for example, if an employee brings you a worn out respirator, you need to replace it. But if they don't know where their respirator is, you don't have to replace it. Then it would be up to them to do it. But really, it's in the employer's interest to make sure all the employees have the PPE they need to work safely. So be reasonable here. If employees provide their own PPE, it's still the responsibility of the employer to make sure that it's adequate and it protects them properly. What things are you not required to provide? Ordinary clothing worn on the job, including steel-toe shoes, are not required to be provided by the employer, and any clothing and supplies needed for protection from the weather. Jackets, hats, gloves, rubber boots, raincoats, sunglasses, and sunscreen. These are considered normal items that the employee would have and can provide. Therefore, the employer is not required to provide those. Inspection of PPE. Any items of PPE should be inspected before they're used. Check for wear, tears, damage, abrasion. And as you can see here, here's some pictures about inspecting a climbing helmet that came out of the product manual for that product. So again, most manufacturers provide the inspection guidelines for the PPE, and they should be a part of your company-specific training for the products you actually use in your workplace. Donning and using PPE needs to be a part of the training. Make sure that the employees put the PPE on before they enter the hazard area. PPE should be relatively comfortable and not interfere with the work. If it's uncomfortable or interfering with the work, then the employees aren't likely to wear it as they should. And PPE should not be removed until the employee is away from the hazard. You should have processes about how to clean and store your PPE. Don't just take your respirator off and throw it in your toolbox or in your bucket with all your other tools. It's going to get dirty, it's going to get contaminated, it's going to get damaged. Eye protection, those things easily get damaged. So have a process for protecting and taking care of and storing your PPE. Know the limitations of the PPE, and you can find that in the manufacturer's instructions. This should be a part of your training as well. So let's look at some of the various types of PPE that we can use. Eye and face protection is important in our industry. Things falling down chimneys, hunks of mortar, or things that we're grinding and chipping, brick dust, all of that stuff can be a hazard. But in general, we need to protect from flying particles, hot metal, liquid chemicals, any type of gases or vapor, and light radiation. We'll talk about that. So make sure you have proper eye and face protection for the job. In the chimney service world, we do a lot of grinding, and a face shield is really the way to go. Eye protection must be rated. There's an ANSI standard. It's Z87.1. Okay, light radiation. Some people are using cutting torches, acetylene. Some folks are using plasma cutters or lasers to cut metal fireboxes. We need to make sure we're properly protected from the effects of the bright light that can be very damaging to your eyes. And these are the types of things that you would identify in your job hazard analysis. If you are using a plasma cutter to cut out a metal firebox, that's a work process. What PPE is necessary for that work process? OSHA has extensive information about eye protection and shading values and requirements. Make sure that what you're selecting is appropriate for the tools that you're using. You can find that in OSHA Standard 1910-133. And there's also a fact sheet. Fact sheet 3499 has some good information. I'll provide a link to that when I post the YouTube version of this seminar on my YouTube channel. Head protection is required whenever there's a potential for falling or dropped objects. OSHA's emphasis on head protection is for protection from falling objects. In our industry, we're using it as protection when the wearer actually falls. So we're doing double duty. I'll talk more about that. If you're working around exposed electrical conductors, then your hard hat needs to be E-rated, means it protects against electrical hazards. Most hard hats do carry the E rating unless they're ventilated. Hard hat should be approved to the ANSI Z89.1 standard. Climbing helmets have been recommended in our industry for some time now, and they give you great protection when you fall. So not only do they protect you from falling objects, like somebody dropped a brick off the roof, but they protect you, the wearer, if you fall. They protect your head. Most serious fall injuries are the result of head injury. You can fall off a typical residential house, and you think, oh, I'm going to break my leg, I'm going to break my arm, whatever. That may be true. You'll recover and you'll be okay in 6 months. But if you hit your head, well, then it's all bets are off. So climbing helmets really give a lot of protection that way. They keep the chin strap, keeps the helmet in place during the fall. So you can get climbing helmets that also meet the Z89.1 hard hat requirement. So on a work site where hard hats are required, your climbing helmet will fulfill that purpose. So Petzl makes a great line of climbing helmets, and they also make eye and face protection that easily attach and remove from the helmet. On the picture on the right, you have the shaded half visor, and then you have the full face visor on the right. So these are approved as eye protection. They meet the ANSI Z87 standard. So a great way to accessorize and add additional protection. Hearing protection. Employers need to provide hearing protection when employees are exposed to loud noises. How many old guys that have been working in the trades do you know that can't hear well? And you have to wonder, is that just, old age and your hearing wearing out, or is that possibly job related? This chart shows the permissible noise exposure under OSHA's requirements, 90 decibels up to 8 hours. And then as the decibel level increases, the permissible duration goes down. This chart shows some, common noise levels. Chainsaw, for example, is 100 decibels and would require hearing protection. Sandblasting could be 120 decibels. A jackhammer, 130. Keep in mind, hearing protection is required above 90 decibels. Think about any of the power equipment you're using, like your sweep vac, anything like that may need hearing protection. You can get a cell phone app, sound meter. It's a very quick, easy, useful way to determine what the noise levels are in your work area. And this would be very useful during your job hazard analysis. If you're around some loud equipment, pull out your cell phone, fire up your sound meter app, and document what those noise levels are. So noise protection is required based on the time-weighted average of the exposure. Keep in mind that hearing loss is preventable, permanent, and so far irreversible. No known way to reverse the hearing loss. So it's based on the intensity and duration of the noise exposure. And there's something called the rule of 3, starting at 85 decibels. When the noise level goes up 3 decibels, the exposure limit or exposure time must be cut in half. So you can see 8 hours is permitted at 85 decibels. When the noise level goes up to 88, the permissible level is cut in half down to 4 hours. If it goes up to 91 decibels, another 3 dB increase, it's again cut in half down to 2 hours. So you can find some situations where the noise protection is going to be necessary in our typical work processes. Hearing protection comes in lots of forms: ear muffs, ear plugs. There are also noise canceling units that use electronics to block out the noise. Any of those things are available. And each piece of hearing protection has a verified noise reduction rating. And so you use that, you determine what the noise level is for the process, and subtract the noise reduction value of your hearing protection to get the new value. For example, a lawnmower is 95 dBs. If your noise protection gives you a 27 dB rating, now you're down to a 68 dB level. So don't ignore the hearing protection. It can definitely have long-term effects. Hand protection is necessary whenever employees are exposed to, sharp metal, harmful chemicals, using rope where they could get a rope burn, lacerations, cuts, abrasions, punctures, any of those things where their hands are exposed to potential hazards, then hand protection is necessary and should be provided by the employer. So again, part of your job hazard analysis, identify what's necessary and provide the proper protection. Foot protection is necessary when there's a danger of falling or rolling objects, striking their feet. If you're working in any environment where something could pierce up through your shoe, or where there's electrical hazards, make sure that your employees have proper foot protection. And there are 2 standards for foot protection, so make sure that your shoes comply if it's necessary. Not necessary in all work environments. Respirators, certainly something in the chimney service world that is necessary. It's a type of PPE, and we will dive into that in future trainings. Other specialized types of PPE are fall protection, chemical safety. Some of these require written protection programs. You have to have company policies on these. So make sure you are complying with those requirements. We provide, and I recommend that you provide your PPE to your employees in a convenient safety bag. On first day of work, our employees get issued a safety bag, which includes all their necessary PPE, and they get their PPE training there on day 1. It includes a climbing helmet, respirators, eye protection, hearing protections, gloves, safety vest. We work on some government work sites where safety vests are necessary. Maybe you do too. The GFCI, which is the ground fault circuit interrupter, it helps helps you comply with OSHA's electrical safety requirements. There's if you look on our YouTube channel, under the Tech Talk segment, there is an electrical safety program that I did, and we talked extensively about the GFCIs in there. Eye wash, just sterile eye wash solution if you get something in your eye, and then some Band-Aids, just because that keeps it handy, and everybody needs a Band-Aid from time to time. So I like the safety bag concept. It's particularly nice for new technicians, trainees that may be working with Tom today and Joe tomorrow. All their stuff's in one place. They can get it and go to work. So in summary, PPE should only be required when the hazards cannot be removed through, engineering controls. The employer needs to assess the work area and determine what PPE is necessary, and then make sure that employees are trained when it's required, what is required, how to properly use it, what the limitations are, and how to care for it, when to retire it. So PPE is an important part of your safety program. Take a look at your work area. If I can ever help you with any of that, just give me a call. I love to talk about safety. Thank you for watching our seminar today. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody and see if there's any questions.
But Jim, one quick question. I mean, like your safety bags and stuff. That's just something you're just giving that out at each employee, and if something's missing or of it, is that something they go back and replace themselves?
Yeah, the employer is required to provide PPE, but if your employees lose it, you can have them replace it. You are not required to replace lost or intentionally damaged PPE. If you ever need that reference, I could provide it, but it's stated pretty clearly right in the OSHA regulations.
Cool. Well, it's been really informative. Thank you very much. Great presentation.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Are there any other questions out there? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and end this presentation. Keep in mind it will be posted on our YouTube channel. Go to Rooftop Safety USA. Look for that on YouTube. We have a lot of technical training and safety programs there. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to our channel. We appreciate that, and let's stay safe out there and have a great day. Bye-bye.